Hello, everyone, and welcome to this webinar regarding some perception tips and tricks when you're doing data analysis with perception. What I'm showing here is an analysis setup where a customer has opened recorded data. So they've set up a sheet in perception for analysis that shows some signals. They've got an XY plot here of torque and voltage versus mechanical angle. We're seeing the name of the recording. In the bottom right, we've got 3 phases of current, an FFT of phase 1 of current, and then the results showing the fundamental RMS of each phase of current. And in this particular test, the user has recorded sets of data with that information. So they're interested in looking consecutively at those different files that were recorded. So this is the first data file, and what I'm going to use next are these perception keys to easily load the next data file. So what I want to do is take, if I open up my folder here, you can see I've got sets of data with the data I'm interested in looking at, and I'm interested in just stepping through those one at a time and seeing how these results compare. So I'm going to use load next recording file from the perception keys. And if I look at how that particular user key is configured, if I right click and say setup, in the configuration, I have it set up to just sort by name. So it's just going to go to the next named file consecutively in the folder where I've opened the existing file. So I'm going to go ahead and click that next button. You can see my file name has now changed to 002. My fundamental RMS values are different, and all of my data updated. So just with a single click of a button, I've been able to load new data into my virtual workbench and view those results. I didn't have to rebuild this analysis page after I opened up the second file. And the reason for that is when I click next, what perception is automatically doing is loading the data out of the next PNRF file as active. What does that mean exactly? So if I also open up my perception data sources here, you can see the data source active. And so when I load new data as active, it doesn't pay any attention, perception doesn't pay any attention to the workbench that's in that PNRF file. It simply takes the data out of that file and puts it into the active data source. And as long as my displays and my formulas all use the same data source information, then I'm going to see results. So if I do it one more time, click the next button. Now I've got my HV003, my third set of data. Things are looking good. Now I don't see my FFT data there. If I scroll out, I think that my FFT cursor just ended up off the data. Yep, there we go. So I'm going to bring that zoom back in a little bit to where I can see those currents a little better. All right, so all of that looks reasonable. Now I go to my next file. I no longer am seeing currents, and I'm missing my voltage here as well. So what happened? The first thing I always check in that regard is to look into data sources and see how that data looks. So first, let's go back to the previous file when I know I have data. And if I expand the ePower group, I can see how my channels are named for the data that I'm looking at. Say, okay, well now let's load that next file. If I now load it as active, and again expand the ePower group, and and I see a difference. So let's see, I'm going to load one of those recordings that was working just fine. I'm going to go to C, Instrument Recordings, Test XYZ, and let's load one of the ones that was working fine, but I'm going to load it as reference. So it'll show up as a reference 1 in my data sources, and I'm going to say open. And now you can see I have this reference 1 data source. And let's look at what the data sources for that file look like as compared to this one. And what I see is here I have active ePower group recorder A inverter, and this one has inverter 1. So what Perception's looking for to be able to display a trace in this particular display right here, if I double click on that, it's looking for inverter 1.out U1 instead of just inverter. So my data sources changed between my files. These LV00123 sets of data have inverter 1 rather than just inverter. So there's a couple different ways we could handle that. One is I could just make some dummy formulas to rename the signals that I'd like to look at with the right name so that they get displayed. And maybe that's the easiest because then it'll work for both of them. So if I say here, well, actually, I go to my analysis page, what we could do is just pull this. This was U. I'm just going to pull I1 over to here, I2 over to here, and I3 over to here. And I would have to update my formulas to get those results. So let's look. So I've updated my displays to show me that if I under here go to U1, I can update that so that I see what I want right there. And then for my formulas here, I'm going to go to my formula sheet, and I was calling those out to be that inverter 1, and you can see it's warning me I don't have a trace that's named inverter1.out.I1. So I can just click in here and change that to inverter. Click in here and change that to inverter. Click in here and change that to inverter. Now these, finding the means of those, happened on these other formulas. So now if I go back to analysis, I need to also, my cycle, that one needs to be updated. There we go. And that one happened automatically. So there, now I have results again. And then what I'm going to do is save file, save virtual workbench as, and I'm going to note that this is the virtual workbench for the low voltage test so that my data sources are saved. I can go over here. And I'm not seeing anything there because I had asked it to only show me trace selection. So let's only look at I1. So whenever I have someone now, I should be able to again go to the next file, which is low voltage 2, and I'm going to get updated values everywhere because now my data source names match again. So this is part of the power of perception, is that you're really able to take setup analysis once, and then for a set of data, automatically have that analyzed, just simply click from one file to the next, set up formulas, set up displays, whatever you want to see, and be able to just see that analysis on various sets of data.